श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ राधा गिरि गोवर्धन की, श्री वृंदावन धाम की, श्री मायापुर धाम की, जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की, यमुना माई की, गंगा माई की, भक्ति देवी की, श्रील प्रभुपाद ट्रांसलेशनल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की, श्रील प्रभुपाद ट्रांसलेशनल प्रसारम डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की, श्री पुरुषोत्तम मास की, Ita go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glory to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We are reading from Canto 3, chapter 29, verse number 22. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 3, chapter 29, verse number 22, which is on the board. We're reading from chapter 29, which is titled Explanation of Devotional Service. So, verse number 22. Yo mam sarveshu bhuteshu shantam atmanam ishvaram hitvarcham bhajte maudyad bhashmani eva juhoti sa. Yo mam sarveshu bhuteshu shantam atmanam ishvaram hitvacham bhajate maudyad bhasmani eva juhotisha. Yo mam sarveshu bhuteshu Santam Atmanam Ishwaram Hitvarcham Bhajate Maudyad Bhasmani Eva Juhotisha. Ya, one who, Mam, me, Sarveshu, in all, Bhuteshu, living entities, Shantam, being present, Atmanam, the Paramatma, Ishvaram, the Supreme Lord, Hitva, disregarding, Archam, the deity. Bhajate, worships. Maudyat, because of ignorance. Bhasmani, into ashes. Eva, only. Juhoti, offers oblations. Sa, he. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Chandra Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. One who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples but does not know that the Supreme Lord as Paramatma is situated in every living entity's heart must be in ignorance and is compared to one who offers oblations into ashes. Purport. It is stated clearly herein that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in His plenary expansion of Supersoul, is present in all living entities. The living entities have 8.4 million different kinds of bodies, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is living in every body, both as the individual soul and as the Supersoul. Since the individual soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, in that sense, the Lord is living in every body. And as Supersoul, the Lord is also present as a witness. In both cases, the presence of God in every living entity is essential. Therefore, persons who profess to belong to some religious sect, but who do not feel the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living entity and everywhere else, are in the mode of ignorance. If, without this preliminary knowledge of the Lord's omnipresence, one simply attaches himself to the rituals in a temple, church, or mosque, it is as if he was offering butter into ashes rather into the fire. One offers sacrifices by pouring clarified butter into a fire and chanting Vedic mantras. But even if there are Vedic mantras and all conditions are favorable, if the clarified butter is poured on ashes, then such a sacrifice will be useless. In other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. The devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant he may be, even in an ant, God is present, and therefore every living entity should be kindly treated and should not be subjected to any violence. In modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Canto 3, chapter 29, verse 22. One who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples, but does not know that the Supreme Lord as Paramatma is situated in every living entity's heart, must be in ignorance, and is compared to one who offers oblations into ashes. So this section, we've just gone through the section which talks about transcendental attributes and how, and proceeding into today's verse, this section deals with how a devotee deals with others. So if you remember, this is 22, in verse number 20, verse number 20, there's a beautiful metaphor that Srila Prabhupada gives, and that is, as the chariot of air carries an aroma from its source and immediately catches the sense of smell, similarly one who constantly engages in devotional service in Krishna consciousness can catch the Supreme Soul who's present everywhere. Srila Prabhupada's one of mostly quoted verses from Brahma Samhita, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena. So one's whose eyes are saturated with devotion can actually, is by his or her mere presence permeates devotion and inspires others. So there are gradations of devotees, as we understand from reading Nectar of Instruction, and also described in Nectar of in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama Adhikari. So here what we are seeing in essence is someone at the lowest rung of the ladder, whereas a Kanishta considers just myself and the deity, is just me and the deity. Everyone else, I wouldn't quote this here, but I don't care. And it's just because of our, as Prabhupada described, it's a prakrita bhakta, just materialistic endeavors. It'd be interesting to see or hear that in the 11th canto, in chapter 29, verse number 15, Krishna is speaking to Uddhava, and in that verse, the chapter is titled Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna has just completed the succeeding chapters that discuss Jnana Yoga and Karma Kanda or Karma Yoga. Now, and in that chapter, in this canto, he's describing Bhakti Yoga, and he's deciphering through Jnana and Karma, and then finally he comes to this section where he's about to enumerate the glories of Bhakti Yoga. So, similar to what we've just said, how someone who just worships the deity but does not acknowledge the existence of Paramatma in every living entity, does not offer respect. So 11:29:15, the translation is, for him who constantly meditates upon my presence within all persons, the bad tendencies of rivalry, envy, and abusiveness, along with false ego, are very quickly destroyed. In the purport, it's a very short purport. We conditioned souls tend to feel rivalry towards our equals, envy towards the superior, and the desire to belittle our subordinates. These contaminated propensities, along with their very basis, false ego, can be quickly vanquished by meditating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead within every living being. So that's the effects of, if we are able to see everything in relation to Krishna, we'll be able to overcome these propensities that are described here in this verse. when I had first come in touch with devotees, I believe it was maybe 2009, along with the Bhagavad Gita, I was given a copy of The Journey Home, written by Radh Vinod Pr, and then along with that, there was several smaller books of Maharaj that were transcripts of his lectures, or as they called, I think they were called nectar drops. And in that nectar drop, one page that I read just spun me around. And Maharaj was saying, do not disrespect anyone, because even an advanced devotee today was once a non-devotee. Even an advanced devotee today was once a non-devotee. And Maharaj gave the example, as we know, of Dhruva Maharaj in the 4th canto. Dhruva Maharaj was his mother, his stepmother, Suruchi, tells him he wants to sit on the lap of his mother, of his father, and his mother tells him, you don't deserve to be sitting on the lap because you're not my child. However, if you go and worship or pray to the Lord, to Lord Vishnu, then in the next birth you'll become my son, and then you'll in that way be promoted to being sitting. So she disrespected him. At that time, Dhruva was not a devotee. But many, many years later, we see as the pastime unfolds, his stepbrother is killed by the Yakshas, and his mother, out of grief, enters into the forest fire and it devours her. And in that purport, Prabhupada writes that how careful and vigilant we should be in our dealings with others. It's a lot of times when we see in our own dealings, I was lucky enough to get a copy of this book. It's Reflections on Sacred Teachings by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, in which he gives a commentary on Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's 64 principles for building a community. So each of these are quotes by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and that Maharaj writes or expands on each of these quotes. So we'll discuss that in a bit, but just wanted to highlight on this one principle. We see even in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verse 25. I'll read it out. And this verse, when I read it again, it made me think. 13.25. Some perceive the supersoul within themselves through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive desires. So, that means to perceive the supersoul through meditation. So His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was explaining this, that yes, through the practice of bhakti, we can see the supersoul within, but it depends on what our Ishtadev is. So he was describing that sometimes getting darshan of the Lord, comparing that to the Dami Buddhi Yogam, getting intelligence by the Lord. In those two instances, getting the intelligence from the Lord to act in a certain situation or to come to some conclusion is actually much higher. Because again, the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, we see Dhruva Maharaj got the darshan of the Lord, but later on, when he was instigated by the Yakshas, he just lost his temper and started fighting. And at that time, when he came to, when the sages or when Brahma comes to him, then through hearing, he actually gets better counsel and he knows what to do. So, getting the intelligence from the Lord, getting guidance from the Lord through sound vibration is actually considered a much higher form of darshan. Many years ago, I think it was maybe 4 years ago, we were fortunate to have His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj with us here in Sydney, and in one morning class that he was giving, he was actually seated on the Vyasasana giving a class, and on maybe 2 or 3 occasions, someone was entering from there, someone was entering from here, on 3 or 4 occasions, just for a split second, there was some, commotion, just, as someone enters, we generally try to make way for them to come and sit, and it's just natural or Vaishnav etiquette. And then Maharaj interrupted for a second, and he said, "This is hearing means there should be no interruption. One should just hear, and hearing is our, you can say, our process or a gateway out, for us to truly appreciate. So when we come in front of the deity, for a Kanishta mentality, it is, as is described here, being disrespectful to others, but more importantly, Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami writes here, there is no way of associating with transcendence besides hearing. Hearing does not mean that we simply let the sound vibration hit the ear. Rather, hearing means that we internalize and imbibe the message so that we know how to act. Our service attitude affects the quality of our hearing. The quality of our service, even more than the quantity of service rendered, indicates how Krishna conscious we really are. So, the glories of hearing, or as I described in 13.25, it says, some perceive the super soul through meditation. In the very next verse, Krishna glorifies, or Krishna is emphasizing the importance of hearing. Through hearing, one gets actually purified. So, I believe maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, when Ganasharam Prabhu here was doing a class on Brihad Bhagavatamrita, in that he gave 2 very beautiful analogies by His Grace Gokuleshwar Prabhu. And he was saying, someone asked Gokuleshwar Prabhu a question that, a lot of times we may hear a verse, or we may hear a pastime, or we may hear someone's even realization that we seem is being repeated. And then someone asked that question, that how do we, in my mind, the moment for example, if I were to open this, someone would tell us, Prabhu or Maharaji, open up the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, you'd be like, oh my God, dehi nosmin yata dehe, again, the same verse. But Prabhu gave a very beautiful answer. He said, as devotees, as Hare Krishnas, our menu is pretty much the same. Every morning we usually have khichdi. So maybe there'll be slight variation, of something every morning. But what he said is that if I go again the next day and I see, oh, it's khichdi again, and this khichdi I had yesterday, I'm not going to have it today. He said, if we just go with that mindset, then we're going to starve ourselves. But if we understand this is beneficial for me, then I will honor it, and it'll actually nourish me. Same analogy, a different analogy that he gave was those that are into gardening. So there's a seed and you pour water, the first step that will come is that the seed will fructify, and then there'll be there'll be slowly some growth coming out of it. Same water that will be poured sometime later, you'll see the flowers start to blossom. Then the same, after a few days, you pour the water again, then you see further growth happening. It's the same water that's being poured on the same seed. Over a period of time, you see further growth and further maturity in it. So similarly for us, hearing the same thing, that's the effect of it. There is an example that's actually given here, or in this verse itself. For one who offers, who's negligent or is somehow not come to that stage, their offering is compared to one who offers oblations into ashes. So usually when we have, it's interesting because I was hearing a class by Dhoni Ramabad Maharaj on this series of verses, and he was saying, it's just for us to reflect on, what yuga is this that's being described here? Satya Yuga. So in Satya Yuga, what's the prime means of perfection? Meditation. And then what's being described here is deity worship. So it's like it's not that deity worship wasn't practiced in those ages. So, for example, for us in this yuga, it is Sankirtan Yagya. So, congregational hearing and chanting of the holy name. But we have deity worship. We also have yagyas that are being performed. What he was contrasting was that even in the previous ages, even though it's not the prime means of achieving perfection in that age, we still have all these ingredients of sacrifice that are being practiced. So as we see in again referring to Brihad Bhagavatamrita, there is a section there. So there are different planetary systems. As we understand, Gop Kumar is traveling through different planets through the practice or through the chanting of his Gopal mantra, Madan Gopal mantra that he's been given by his guru. As he goes up, as we are in Bhuva Loka, and then it's Mahaloka, Tapaloka, and then the higher planets. As we penetrate through the Viraja river, then we enter into Vaikuntha. So in Mahaloka, the sages are actually they're performing yagya. So over here we perform yagya for 30-40 minutes. Sometimes you'll see in Mayapur it's happening for 6-7 hours. But in Mahaloka, the yagya is continuously happening. So it's continually offering of different ingredients. Over here, the yagya, the offering the Lord accepts is actually in principle. We understand, the mouth being the fire, the mouth being the fire being the mouth of the Lord. But in Mahaloka, we understand that, or as it's described in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the Lord is personally present there, extending His hands and accepting the offerings. So how much more glorious are the residents of Mahaloka? So what's being described here is that even if everything is done perfectly, following all of the terms and conditions of a yagya, if one is devoid of bhakti, or to, as it's described here, to respect for others, then somehow or other, then the Lord doesn't accept the offering. So there, the Lord is accepting the offering, but as is described there, even if that's devoid of bhakti, then if we were to offer it, it's somehow or the other it doesn't please the Lord. So this aspect of respect to others, you'll always see. Once Srila Prabhupada was asked by a news reporter, how do we know your followers or your members? So Prabhupada just said, they're perfect gentlemen and gentlewomen. He said, by their own behavior and their act of service, as we understand, to the Supreme Lord, but that actually extends to everyone else. They actually have to be recognized. My Guru Maharaj was once sharing this story, and he said that actually there are two stories by multiple devotees, but my Guru Maharaj was saying that because he had joined the movement, because he came from such an affluent, wealthy family, his father tried on many occasions to in one sense bribe or to induce him to come back, and he said, I'll give you $1 million if you were to come back. And he said, I have to seek permission from Srila Prabhupada. And he went to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada just said, look, he's your son. If he wants to come, he can come. And that over a period of time, in their meeting with Srila Prabhupada in each of those meetings was so he exuded such a sense of dignity towards his parents, towards all the family members, and he would just treat them in such a loving and compassionate way. In the end, when they were leaving, my Guru Maharaj's parents told Guru Maharaj, your spiritual master I have two things to say about your spiritual master. And that is, your spiritual master is a brilliant organizer, and he knows how, he's expert at dealing with people. And Guru Maharaj said that his father was such a distinguished person, or he had a rep, he was so widely respected in the whole of Chicago that actually, in fact, after he left his body, one of the main chambers of the court of Chicago was named after him. He said, my father always lived by high values, and in his value system, these are the two highest values that he lived by, and that's what he said that Srila Prabhupada, exemplified to the fullest. That he's a brilliant organizer and he knows how to deal with people. So for us, yes, now on a mundane level, dealing with people can also come down to, as is described here, we may expertly gauge someone or try to, in the material world, it's always, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's that always that give and take mentality. But for us to see that on a spiritual level, that is to see everything connected to Krishna. So to see everything in relation to Krishna means to serve, or to engage everything in the service of Krishna. Again, Srila Prabhupada was very expert at this. Once there was, I believe it was in Mayapur or somewhere else, I can't remember, there was a very famous Mayavadi guru, and his disciples were distributing his flyers, and the devotees were just chasing them away. And Srila Prabhupada said, what do they have? They said, oh, they have some flyers. Prabhupada said, bring the flyers. The devotees like, what? Prabhupada, you want us to bring those flyers? He took those flyers and he said, okay, now serve the devotees on this. So he engaged, the flyers or that piece of paper to serve prasad and to engage, that personality, to engage, he engaged that person in Krishna's service. So somehow or the other, we should be able to come to that level of how to engage others in Krishna's service. Maharaj writes in this book about dealing, a lot of times, at least for myself, or, I'm pretty sure many can relate, when we first join, there's a fanatic side of us which says, oh, I'm the greatest, my family, because they are opposing me, they're all demons, so we somehow come up with that understanding. And Maharaj was saying that how that over a period of time, we should somehow or the other maintain a relationship, or even if our family is not favorable, or our friends are not favorable, we should always keep that a healthy form of respect to communication with them. It could be a sense of even extending some sort of, acknowledgement or greeting, or, just checking in with them from time to time. Because in their eyes, they always would see you as someone that that's an extension of themselves. But how, and Maharaj was saying that sometimes it's just because of their own evolution that we may not be able to, that they are not able to come to that level. But we should always somehow or the other be agents of Krishna's compassion. And he said that just means that we have to see everyone as part of Krishna's family. Obviously, the level of compassion that we may have as opposed to Nityananda Prabhu, we can't imitate, but we at least understand that there's a sense of duty of compassion to others, and where do we see ourselves in it? One other principle that Maharaj describes in this book is tolerance. And he says, Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur says, to learn to tolerate is one of the most important responsibilities of those living in the mutt. And Maharaj writes in this that he was just giving an example that powerful Kshatriyas do not always respond with violence. you don't see Yudhishthir Maharaj at every stroke, just pulling out his army, because they are so grounded in their own sense of identity and purpose that they don't always respond to. And there are many reasons. Is that because they just don't want to invite unnecessary chaos into the situation. And then Maharaj writes very powerfully here again, is that a Vaishnava is very tolerant, because the closer one comes to Krishna, the more one feels a sense of humility. Those who are far from the Lord get imbalanced by whatever happens in the environment. So, obviously, when we say we have to give respect to others, a lot of times giving respect to others in others' view is just to give them everything what they want, But we are limited. Our giving capacity is limited, so we can only give so much. So a lot of times in others' eyes, that respect may fall short. But in our capacity, whatever we can do, we do. And then the other aspect is to tolerate. Again, as Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, as Lord Chaitanya, as we know, there's a here you see him embracing. There's a photo of him embracing, through the power of his chanting, the elephants and all other animals start embracing each other. However, again, our chanting may not be that pure, but we understand that that's a very high ideal. We at least start from where we can. Our relationships with devotees are of utmost importance. Somehow understanding, in that same verse that I described earlier, from Canto 11, which talks about the effects of if one starts to see the presence of the super soul in every living entity, one gets rid of envy or the others. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes his commentary on that, is that to the extent that we see everything in relation to Krishna, to that extent we are cultivating a mood of service. And the contrary is, to the extent that we're seeing everything separate from Krishna, to that extent we are cultivating a sense of enjoyment. So, these sections or these principles, or the principle of seeing everything in relation to the deity, in relation to Shri Radha Gopinath, the sooner we understand that how they are our parents, and as parents they love each and every child of theirs. So in that sense we should somehow or the other. Once I remember Ghanshyam Prabhu was I think he was doing a Priya Bhagavatam class some years ago, and he was describing this, that a lot of times, when he was saying, we asked the deities, how do you see your devotees? So a lot of times we understand that, we may go in front of the deity and say, I'm having difficulty with this. So similarly, other devotees are also going and expressing their hearts to the deity that I'm having difficulty with this. So how is Radha Gopinath actually seeing them? How are they seeing their worship? They're acknowledging it, they're accepting it. So that's the consciousness that we should be cultivating. It's difficult, but as discussed some time ago, that we measure ourselves on progress and not perfection. So we see how far we've come and how much further we have to go. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu was describing that in that same verse about perceiving the super soul through meditation. And he said that yes, once we get past the anartha nivritti stage, when we've furthermore purified, then we are actually, it is described that the soul actually has eyes. It can actually perceive a higher reality. It starts perceiving higher realities. But that higher reality is of service. Of service to, again, Prabhu was describing Ishtadev, but for us here, it's Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, Shri Shri Gaurnita, Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadra, and to the Acharyas. Yep. So, yep. So it's actually a very important aspect, especially like I said here, it's for us to progress further, where the relationship from just me and Radha Gopinath extends out to everyone else. That's a progressive march towards understanding how what's the true what awaits us actually in the spiritual realm. So I'll end here. If anyone has a question or comment, reflection. Yes, Kansai Prabhu. Yep. Yep. Hearing does not mean that we simply let the sound vibration hit the ear. Rather, hearing means that we internalize and imbibe the message so that we know how to act. A service attitude affects the quality of our hearing. The quality of our service, even more than the quantity of service rendered, indicates how Krishna conscious we really are. In fact, I didn't get to discuss this, but towards the end of this section, Maharaj writes that even, and I'll just read it verbatim, even now readers, he's describing even in a class, even now readers will imbibe this message differently according to their consciousness. And he's saying, someone may think, I'm glad that someone like Maharaj is telling the devotees in our movement how to act as better devotees. So everyone will accept it and process it according to their consciousness. Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? What else? Mm-hmm. What is the source of enthusiasm? You mean how can the Kanishta grow? How the Kanishta can improve? So, thank you, Prabhu. Very nice question. Through hearing, hearing the holy name, associating with the Vaishnavas. In fact, I didn't get to read one more here, which was I'll show you. Maharaj writes, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, become united with one purpose and serve Hari. The most powerful way to achieve this goal in the Vaishnava community is to see all of our activities as offerings to Krishna. The person washing the dishes can think these are Krishna's dishes. The people sweeping the floor, offering the arati, dressing the deities, or painting the temple can all see their service as offerings to the Lord. So, enthusiasm, or how can they actually grow further, is through hearing and also through, like I said, the quality of hearing. A lot of times they may hear a lot, but somehow or the other, because of their own consciousness, they'll process it differently. They'll just, say, oh, this class, yes, I know this one of the devotee, they should hear this class. They should actually hear, they, rather than taking it as a first person, they'll think, oh, yes, that means whatever I was thinking is actually correct. So this person is a rascal because someone said in the class that if he doesn't listen to this, then he or she is a rascal. So quality of hearing, but most importantly, what I have seen that has helped, and especially, Her Grace Devaki Mataji, she wrote many books on false ego and Vaishnava relationships and Varnashrama system, and she said that one can really grow if one somehow or the other is fortunate enough to accept a mentor, so some sort of guidance from someone who is with whom you can have Guya Makyati Prichti, the six loving exchanges. If somehow Krishna puts someone in your life with whom you can have that sort of a relationship, then where a lot of times we tend to associate with people or tend to be with people who'll not want to tell anything to us because they want to somehow, they feel just by having this friendship it can benefit them. For example, I may not tell you something because I know if I tell you, then I'll somehow be impacted by it. But if there is honest trust and love communication between the two, then you're open to tell, like, oh Prabhu or Maharaji, this is something I'd like to share with you. Maybe you can incorporate this, and maybe you're thinking this way, but maybe this is how it is. Or maybe sometimes we share our own realization. So that relationship with someone can actually help us grow. Again, feedback is or communicating feedback can always be a challenge, but if it's done in a healthy way where both parties can be receptive, then it's actually very powerful. In that way, a person can really grow. Thank you. Okay. One more time. Thank you very much. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Ita Go Premanande, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki,